Well, good morning, everybody. Throughout the earlier part of this week, I didn't make much mention of Hurricane Otis in the Pacific Ocean. In fact, as you remember, I didn't even know its name, and that was because it was not forecast to become much of a system. I want to thank Tomer Berg. He's got a phenomenal website. I've shown it to you many times in these reports. And what he did was he went back and starting at 0Z on the 24th, so this would have been in the evening on the 23rd, looked at every forecast model's projected strength of Otis. And then what Otis actually did. So in the span of about 12 hours, it went from a tropical storm all the way up to a Category 5 strength system. And as it did so and hit that part of Mexico, just did a tremendous amount of damage. So it still shows you how we can get incredibly rapid intensification right along our shoreline and how poorly our models still handle this. So it's a very important lesson. It'll be studied extensively as we just think about what systems like this are capable of doing. Okay, from there, I want to give you a quick recap of the first couple of rounds of the weather systems we were watching coming across North America this week. Snowfall first. Now this map goes through 0Z on the 26th, so that's last night in the evening, 6 or 7 o'clock. Mountain time would have been 6 o'clock. And what you've got right in through here is a pretty well forecasted heavy swath of snow, 6 to 10 inches, right where the models kind of eventually honed in on this over the last 4 or 5 days. We saw our heaviest snows in the Yellowstone area and then here in the Cascades as well. And remember, we still have our third and final wave to dip through here, and this is still ongoing early this morning. So remember, these snowfall totals did not include anything added up from last evening till now. But this next map does, This one is looking at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation, so everything measured by our radar and gauge network. And while we've talked about the snow here, look at the decent rains that have come into parts of coastal Washington and Oregon. We did get some moisture that got all the way into California yesterday. We saw some decent flow coming into parts of Arizona, New Mexico. And again, there's been some long-standing drought issues here just due to a lack of a monsoon this year. But I'm sure your eyes are drawn to kind of these two very heavy corridors in through this area. First push through this area was from the remnants of Hurricane Norma. Then we watched the sizable southeast ridge develop, and we've just continued to watch storms just slowly work their way around the edge of that ridge. Some places here have picked up just a tremendous amount of rainfall in Texas and Oklahoma and pockets of Kansas. And of course, we watched the severe weather events unfold in Minnesota and Wisconsin over the last 3 days. So how quickly is this all going to translate its way to the east? We got to talk about that. But first, I'd like to take you to Dallas really quickly just to show you what the weather's been like down here in Texas this year. So this is a time series from the beginning of the year till now on Dallas's rainfall. And just to show you how long-standing time series like this and the statistics we derive from them do not capture the variability. We're right now in Dallas at 101% of normal precipitation. A lot of that came from just repeated storms early in the season, especially in April and May. But remember, starting around, June 15th, it just shut all down. There's a flat line in through here that cannot be ignored where rapid onset drought developed and the temperatures got incredibly hot. But we made all that back up with a few big rainfall events, including what we've seen here in the last 2 days. But just to show you what was endured during this long stretch of dry weather, I went back and grabbed the year-to-date temperatures. And as you look at it, look at all the heat that they had during that time period in July and August. And all these are just the days where the high temperature was up there above 90. Now that's common in Dallas, but they had 48 days where they were above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 117 days this year above 90. And overnight lows that were above 70, they had 108. So it's just important to see kind of the time disparity here in the delivery of rainfall. Well, Dallas, you're not done. Looking back at the last 10 to 12 hours of radar here, you can see how slowly this frontal boundary is pushing to the east. So there's still quite a bit more rainfall stretching from parts of Texas through Oklahoma, southeastern Kansas, Missouri, up into Illinois. And again, we have yet to see the third wave come down that's going to emerge this weekend in parts of Colorado. So there is still more to come with this particular system. All right, the temperatures this morning at 6 a.m. as I was recording this already starting to show the extent of the brutally cold air that will be coming across the country. It is butting up against the Rocky Mountains right now. It's a very shallow air mass, but the temperatures in here already down into the teens early this morning while we're, 80 in far southern Texas, up into the 60s through parts of the Midwest. There's some pretty cold air that's going to be coming in behind this. We've got right now, early this morning, again, our hard freeze warnings out for the west. And then we've got our winter storm warnings still in place from Montana through North Dakota. Fog and flooding. That's what we've got set up for us this morning. Now, the wave that's setting all of this up, remember, we've been talking about this for 12 days now. I know more than 12 days. I think it's a bit longer than that. But there's the omega pattern that we were discussing. The wave we're still interested in watching come through is this guy right in here. But I'm keeping an eye on this one. I know it doesn't seem like much, but I went and I ran some trajectories. My kids asked about Halloween next week, and I said, well, would you like to know where the air is coming from? And this is what we've got. So we live right over here just outside of Champaign-Urbana. And the flow, which originated in the Pacific, is going to run north of Alaska and grab some Arctic air on its way toward us by the time we get into, well, near trick-or-treating on the evening of the 31st. And so this is what's coming. This is the trajectory because of that omega pattern delivering some very hot air to Alaska while delivering extremely cold air on the eastern side of it coming out of the Arctic. You can see it right here. So this is just a map I make from the European model. It's troughs and ridges. I normally show you the weather bell maps, but I like my projection on this one, so that's why I chose it. So this is what I'm keeping an eye on. There's the trough now we're going to watch. Here's the lead wave. So you see the kicker coming in on the backside here, but watch this guy up here. You see it is going to roll through the Canadian archipelago. It's now here, coming into Canada right there on Monday, and then dives into the upper Midwest and northern plains by Tuesday, and by Tuesday night sits right over the Quad Cities. So that trough of low pressure was aided by this guy right here. It's just kind of amazing to watch that flow. Now, where do we end up by Halloween? Well, we still are quite amplified, but this will be the extent of the really cold air while the west gets some warmer conditions coming through. And what we're going to watch as we get out there beyond that time period is the behavior of the Pacific jet. And I've shown you many times the last 10 days or so that it is south and it's extended. And we're getting a sense of that. If I take you out there again to Halloween, there's that deep trough. We're going to watch the Pacific jet begin its extension by that Friday. Okay, so next Friday. And you see that it pushes into the Pacific Northwest, not only in the operational runs, but in the ensembles as well. So this is going to flood some mild Pacific air into the country. Everything goes zonal in the flow. That's why it's mild. We keep the coldest air north. We're going to keep warmest air to the south, and right in the middle, the flow is going to come. And we're going to kick off some weak what we call least cyclogenesis in this area, somewhere in the first 7 days of November, probably the end of that first 7-day stretch of days here. So the pattern is going to flatten out after being very amplified right now. So let's go ahead and have a look at what this all means, okay? So looking late last night into early this morning, playing through the middle of the day today and getting into this evening. That's where we're watching kind of the heaviest rains push into this direction, still more snow on the backside of this system. And we're going to play through Thursday night and into Friday morning, early Friday morning. So again, if I walk you back through that, this is the tail end of that deeper trough that came through here, adding to the one that was out ahead of it, pulling its moisture through Iowa and Illinois later today. So ready? Here it is through tonight, getting into tomorrow morning. Now there could be this like pencil thin kind of ribbon along the main frontal boundary here of precipitation this Friday. And that's going to try to work its way to the east. But again, it's running into a formidable barrier called the Southeast Ridge. So brutally cold air here, warm air here, and right in between the two, we're going to force the air to rise. And you can see the model producing that front right where I just drew that line. So that's through 3 o'clock on Friday. And we play forward and that front just slowly slides. So this is not continuing just to barrel into the southeast, which means the cold air is going to have a limit on how quickly it can make its way to the east. And then what do we see? The final wave of our discussion starting to emerge on Saturday morning right here in the Rockies. It's got a good pull of moisture out ahead of it. It's going to have some snow farther to the south because of the extent of that colder air that came in behind this. And we need to take a look at what this might mean in terms of precip, in terms of rain, snow, everything. So this morning's WPC model, this shows us total rainfall through the next 7 days. It's now increased the totals right in through this area. It's moved it a bit farther to the east. What's great about this is we're going to be hitting some of the major rivers that get into the lower Mississippi Valley, which is an ongoing story with us. You can see the presence of the southeast ridge, the cold, dry air coming into Canada, the lack of strong subtropical flow keeping much of the southwest on the drier side of it. But again, this Sunday, we're going to watch right in through here for our next big wave to kind of come out. So let's grab a look at it by comparing the GFS to the European model. We've already seen this by looking at the high-res NAM. So that's system number, I guess it's number 2 moving its way out. And here we are Saturday afternoon and evening, getting into Sunday morning right in through here. Now this is when the last trough comes diving in out of the mountains. And I just have to mention that I've seen the models a few times now, both of them attempt to put down some ice in this area. Now, how do we get that? There's such cold air underneath this, but there's plenty of warm air being drawn around this ridge that's going to go right over the top of this. So we could get that inversion that we would need to set up the risk for some ice. So could it be in the panhandles all the way up to this part of Kansas? Possibly. It is in both models. Snow on the northern side of it. That is Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. We then play this through 7 p.m. We watch that low kind of get just squashed by the lack of good support, cold air behind, southeast ridge. The front presses through. I mean, it's in both models, pretty well timed. We're out here Monday morning playing this forward. And then here, right there, is the wave I mentioned that was over the Arctic today. And that is the one that comes in Tuesday afternoon and evening. Now, the GFS puts it in the eastern Great Lakes. The European model drops it right into Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. And this is 7 p.m. on Halloween, and right now the European model says, hey, there might be some light snow in this area as you're out trick-or-treating with your family. So be prepared for that. Now, after that system curls up east, the European model's been most aggressive on developing a big East Coast cyclone. So you saw the deep trough coming in, and then it's forced to run up because the ridge just moved offshore. So there is the potential for this, but the GFS wants nothing to do with it. We've now watched 3 straight model runs from the European attempt to be putting down some snow in the interior of New England out of this and race up a big system. So it has been there, and I don't think we can ignore it. It's about a week out in the model forecasts. This is next Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So I need to keep a close eye on this. The rest of the country, a break. And what do we see? We see the pattern resetting in the west, the zonal flow coming in, and there's our next few systems. So again, it's all about the change in the Pacific Ocean jet stream behavior that's driving this right now. And there comes the next big push starting around the 3rd or the 4th of November. So let's add up some precip here. We're going to go to the high-res European model first. I'm just going to play this out 7 days as we normally do just to kind of get a grip on total accumulated precip. So that's 7 days. Remember, when you're looking at my color bar, I try to make 2 inches pretty bright so you can see kind of where that heaviest corridor is going to be. You compare this to the GFS, you get this. So this is the GFS, here's the European model. And I imagine you can already start to pick out the differences, but I'm going to show them to you. Over the next 7 days, everywhere that's in these shades of green up to blue, this would represent where the European model is wetter. So it is much more aggressive through the Midwest, through New England with the next couple of systems. And down here in the south, you can see where the GFS is trying to put down its heavier rains, but overall, it's another situation where the European is the wetter model because of the timing and speed of the system. The GFS is too progressive. It shoves it out too fast. So we'll keep an eye on this as we kind of go forward. Snowfall side of it, let's just play this out to get an idea. We're back to my maps. Finally got my website repaired yesterday. So I really apologize for it going down. This is the 5th time we've had Amazon lose our services this month after 18 months of no problems. But that's 7 days from the European model. Remember, on my maps, we start the blue at 4 inches. So we could possibly see some light snow coming through here with that October 31st system. This would be the system following it. The model's continuing to try to show up with some heavy snow here. We'll look at the probabilities in a moment. And this is what's left of the current system. And there's the new one on Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, dropping the biggest snows into Colorado. GFS, same time period. So European GFS. Biggest differences are going to be with the weekend system, the next week's system coming through parts of New England. Let's have a look at some probabilities. This is the chance of getting an inch in the ensemble. So it is important to note that the ensembles are not as aggressive on the snow here or the snow coming through with that last little wave down here into parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. It's not making it that far south. Chance of 3 inches of snow. We can keep stepping this up. Let's go up to 6 inches of snow. There we're finding our heaviest corridor here and in the Rockies with the next two systems coming through, the one now and then the one that dips in here on Sunday. On the rainfall side of it, I want to show you the drier side of this first, just to continue to point out the drier air now, very cold air in the Canadian prairie, the dryness that's in the southwest, and also the extent of the ridge that's over the southeast. On the wet side of this is still what's left. We still have this chance of getting an inch over the next 10 days. Here's the chance of getting 2 inches over the next 10 days. Remember, watch the west coast as I go from day 10 out to day 15. That's when the zonal flow comes in, really beginning to increase those odds in that area. Our week 2 forecast reflect that. So from the CPC and the European model, they've been the first to pick up on the wetter conditions due to the extended jet stream coming in mid to late next week. And the GFS is catching up as well. But for a lot of us here, we're going to have cold air initially. Big system rolls up the East Coast, then drier air, zonal air, and mild air coming in. So until then, things are pretty volatile. And this is this is where we are seeing in the models the chance to have a frost over the next 7 days. And now we're pulling this cold air pretty far to the south in Texas and Oklahoma down to Arkansas, clipping the southern tip of Illinois, right along the Ohio River, and patchy throughout parts of New England. To show you what those low temperatures are going to do, it's the change that's just amazing. Here's today's minimum temperatures, okay? Look at that. I mean, we're some places here almost 30 degrees warmer than normal. Then you go into Thursday, same thing, but watch by Friday. Into Saturday, the front advances. Here it is on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Okay, that's Halloween. We can see that frost line right down there. Okay, so pretty cold air that's expected to come into play here. Next, let's go ahead and have a look at these high temperatures. Got to start this on Thursday. There we go. There's Thursday, getting into Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Look at that cold air just penetrating through the pattern into next week. All right, let's look at the same thing we always do, the 5-day sliding window. I want to show you that by day 5 through 10, the coldest air is extended during that first few days of November all the way to the south and to the east. But watch the more mild air come in off the Pacific once we get out here to the 5th through the 10th of November. And that's been pretty robust in the forecast models. All right, now tomorrow we'll do some deeper dives into the long range. But first, what I want to do is I want to show you there is good model agreement on that more mild air coming in day 10 through 15. This is the GFS. I just showed you the European model. And what I want to really get into is what's going to happen in South America. One thing to think about, there is the chance of some pretty cold air coming in day 5 through 10 in the forecast. So this would really just be the tail end of October, beginning of November, coming into Argentina. And there's some concern about frost hitting far southern Argentinian growing areas, maybe a little bit into Buenos Aires. I saw temperatures getting down below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is an indicator that you could get some frost. So let's watch out for that. That's not the next 5 days. That's the 5 days that follow. What I want to talk about in these last few slides here is I want to talk about this map, because we continue to see very dry conditions around the Amazon, and they keep leaking into northern Mato Grosso and Tocantins. But over the next 10 days, our flooding problems just persist. Some places down here picking up another 5 to 7 inches. So this is like 40 plus days of flooding in parts of Paraguay, northern Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, Paraná, southern Mato Grosso do Sul. But we are expecting heavier rains to start to build into Sao Paulo, into Goiás, and into Minas Gerais over here. Near normal rains moving into parts of Mato Grosso, though, over the next 10 days. But it's this disparity on either side that I'm interested in thinking about here. I think a lot of it has to do with the MJO playing with one other component. You see, normally if I saw MJO phase 1 developing, which we've talked about for weeks now, or phase 8, my brain says, well, that's actually, look at this, a favorable setup for rainfall here. There's phase 8, there's phase 1. You see, the suppression is there. That's where it's drier. It tends to be wetter over Africa in these two phases. Yet we're not quite fully getting that, right? We've got the drier conditions here. It's trying to creep up with wetter conditions, but we're just not seeing it. And you've got everything else in it, right? Drier there and wetter here. This is the 10-day forecast. Everything is lining up with MJO phase 8, phase 1 combination, except bringing that rain farther and farther into Brazil's main growing areas. So I had a good think about this morning, and I said, well, what's happened in October? Have we still been pulling from down in the subtropics? Remember, we talked about that back in September. We haven't. We've actually made the switch here. This is pretty close to the normal monsoonal flow. You could say maybe it's a little bit weaker, but it's not like it's so weak that there's a problem. But that's where the moisture comes from. It gets pulled off the ocean, curls around, and exits, and that's where it's delivered from. So I said, well, maybe it's just that this monsoon is a bit weaker. So I said, all right, let's go back, and for that bounding box right there, let's reconstruct the historical precipitation. Now, we do know that since the 80s, let's pull this up here, we've had a well-known drying trend in Brazil. That's been well documented. I presented it in the past. But I said, well, what made these wetter years? So I pulled them all out, and I made this. Now, do you notice that the best flow during wet Octobers is just kind of coming from this direction? It's like this, and it exits. That's the trajectory of the Brazilian monsoon. So I'm looking at that, and I go, well, wait a minute. We've got this. Let's try to get these lined up. Here is wet years, and this is this year. I'm like, that's not terribly far off. What I think the problem is here. Over the Amazon, humidity levels have been anywhere between 10 and 20% below normal. So the flow's coming in, but it's running into very, very dry air that's been over the Amazon now for months. Now, we talked about it, what is it, a week ago, 10 days ago, about the drought on the Amazon. There's the mouth of it there. And this, I think, is what's causing this. So normally when you get the moisture coming in, the Amazon adds to it, but it's dry there. And as a result, the Amazon is stealing the moisture before it gets into our northern and central growing areas and our eastern growing areas. So where all the moisture is down south, that's where our flooding has been. The drought that's been in Argentina just continues. And by the way, just to show you, in Argentina, I went first into Buenos Aires. And I want to show you that right now, if we look at their year-long precipitation, spring rains have been hard to come by. I mean, very, very hard to come by. This was back in August. So not a whole lot since then. That's, in Buenos Aires province. If we come in here to Cordoba, let's just pick this spot out in Cordoba, Pilar, almost nothing. Okay. So if you just look, this is August, September, and October, and we're just not measuring any precipitation. And then we come over here to Santa Fe. Let's just click in Santa Fe, Entre Rios. They've had one decent event, a 50 millimeter rainfall. But look at how dry things were before that. So when I mentioned earlier in this week about the extent of the drought that's in Argentina, this is what I'm referring to. And I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.